What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the third installment of What If Deku Had Aokijis Powers. Now, this is going to be the final part, so if you guys went on to enjoy this series, I would appreciate it if you guys were to tune in for the movie version of this and slap a like on each individual part of the series, seeing as it helps the channel do a ton better in the algorithm. That said, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Okay, so jumping back into the story, we pretty much cut back to the entire class right in UA, right? Everybody's just bickering, they're talking to each other, and they're all pretty much just excited about the previous events of the UA Sports Festival. People are congratulating Deku on his achievement of being the winner, and Bakugo would tell him that, there was really no other option for him. He was not going to win, that they fought about 1,000,000 times, and every time that they fought, it doesn't matter what Bakugo does, Deku always won. So it was like, you know what, dude? I just accepted it. You're stronger than me, and it's okay. It's fine by me. Just as long as villains aren't stronger than me, I'm cool with that. And so Bakugo pretty much just fist bumps Deku, and so Aizawa walks in the classroom and is like, all right, students, today we have a special guest. And in comes Midnight, right? The second that Midnight enters the room, Izuku looks at her and he's like, damn, I've missed her. And like he looks right at her and she's like, all right, class, so today you guys are gonna pick your hero names, right? Now, as soon as this happens, Izuku kind of just like is like looking at her in a certain type of way the entire time that they're there. Like Izuku is like, he's giving her that Riz stare, you know what I'm saying? And my boy Izuku's like letting it be known that like he likes what he sees. And so, when he finally goes up there and she's like, all right, so what's your hero name? He goes, I thought about it for a bit and I decided that I would want to pick the hero name Frozone. It just sounds pretty cool. She would immediately say, that's an awesome name. And then he'd be like, yeah, Midnight's a pretty cool name as well. How'd you think about it? She just begins to tell the story about it. And, he just looks at her as if he's all interested. And she's like, oh, well, thanks. And from here, Izuku just walks back to the classroom and Bakugo's like, dude, no way you're hitting on Midnight right now. Izuku's like, what, dude? You only live once, right? And Bakugo's like, I guess. As he goes up there and he's like, Lord Explosion Murder. But Midnight is like, no. And then he has to change his name to Dynamite. You know what I'm saying? It's a pretty cool hero name, but like still not as cool as Lord Explosion Murder. But regardless of that, what ends up happening after the class is basically Izuku like pretty much stays until everything would be all said and done. And Midnight and Aizawa would be the only ones there, except Aizawa's pretty much passed out. And Izuku looks at Midnight and he's like, hey, I really enjoyed having you in the class today. And Midnight walks up to Izuku and she's all like, look, all I'm gonna say is that like you're cute for your age, but you're a bit too young for me. And Izuku looks at her and he's like, so if I grow up a little bit, then this could be a possibility. And a little bit of ice comes off of his breath and she's like, I'm not saying no, but I'm also not saying yes. And she walks at the class and Izuku's like, I'm finna bag me on MILF. But after this, Izuku basically walks out of the classroom and the dude pretty much just goes on to go to his internship. Now, who does Izuku go after in terms of the internship? Let's just say that he goes with Endeavor, because Endeavor ended up actually sending him a request. And since Todoroki's not going to accept because he didn't have his talk with Izuku and, make him kind of want to forgive his father, Izuku's pretty much the one that's there with Endeavor. Now, the entire agency process that Izuku would spend time with Endeavor, Izuku would pretty much be showing Endeavor that he has the control over his quirk of a pro hero, not to mention the speed to keep up with Endeavor himself. And Endeavor would be extremely shocked that a kid is even at UA having this level of finesse, that if he was out on the streets, he could probably save hundreds of thousands of lives. He would question why the Hero Society has to have some people be older than a certain age to become heroes, but nonetheless, he would decide that it is what it is, and eventually, he ends up pretty much just continuing to talk to Izuku and tell him what to do stuff. He says it in a very rude, condescending way every time, but Izuku doesn't mind so long as he gets to get the information down that he likes. And towards the end of it, Izuku would look at Endeavor and ask him if he would be willing to have a little bit of a sparring session with him. Endeavor looks down at him and he's like, kid, you know what you're asking me, right? You're asking to fight the number 2 hero. You either got a lot of guts or you're downright crazy. And Izuku looks at him and goes, well, I guess I'm downright crazy. So, you accept or are you scared? Endeavor scoffs and he's like, come with me, kid. Water break! ASMR. Oh yeah. Anyways, so after that, what basically ends up happening is Izuku goes to like this empty training room area that Endeavor. Okay, I'm gonna throw this water bottle out of here. Endeavor ends up taking Izuku towards this training area where like there's really nothing there, and Izuku looks towards Endeavor as Endeavor says, look kid, you can throw any attack you want at me, it's not gonna do a thing. And Izuku just goes, fine. As you know, using his ice powers, he creates an ice sculpture of a phoenix and it just flies. It just flies straight at Endeavor, right? And Endeavor is like shocked, like he shoots his hell flames at it, right? And you know, the phoenix, it obviously does melt, but by the time that it's melted, Endeavor, okay. I'm sorry, I need to stop talking as slow as I am. All right, so let me just picture the scene in my head real quick so I can give you guys a better battle. Okay, so basically what ends up happening here is that essentially Izuku shoots like a fire phoenix at him, right? And Endeavor melts it, but because he's melting it, he has like his vision in front of him kind of like messed up, so like he can't see in front of him. And Izuku eventually proceeds to blitz over towards Endeavor and have it to where, you know, him and Endeavor are like basically going at it, right? Like he ends up like getting in front of Endeavor by the time that he finishes making the phoenix, and Izuku rushes in at Endeavor and he tries to land a hit with his sword. He's using his ice saber, right? And Endeavor would end up having to actually dodge out of the way and then shooting a huge ball of flames at Izuku. Now, the ball of flames would actually end up hitting him and it would create an opening inside of his like face and his chest and stuff like that. And Endeavor would rush to him saying, kid, are you all right? But the thing would basically turn into like water on the ground, and Endeavor turns back only to see Izuku there, who would literally just land a mean punch to the face of Endeavor. And after he does this, he ends up pretty much getting sent flying to the floor, leading Izuku to say, I Sage, as he slams his foot onto the ground and everything in the room begins to pretty much get like covered in ice. And Endeavor would be surrounded in it as well, but his flames would be picking up, and they eventually turn blue, and it like melts everything, like everything around him in his vicinity begins melting because it's just that hot, right? And he walks towards the direction of Izuku and he's like, you got some guts, kid, but let's see you keep up with this, as he shoots blue flames at the direction of Izuku, and Izuku shoots a strong like layer of thick ice straight at Endeavor, and it's just like clashing. It's like ice and fire just like colliding with each other until eventually so much smoke fills up the area, and Izuku looks at Endeavor and he's like, good job buddy, but not good enough. As you know, he steps on it and like more ice begins coming to the point where Endeavor's fire can't melt it at the rapid pace that Izuku's shooting his ice at. And because Endeavor has a time limit and Izuku doesn't, he's able to eventually get overwhelmed, leading Endeavor to have to accept that he lost. And well, that's pretty much it. Like, he just lost. That's it. GG's. Izuku was actually the winner, and on this day he ends up finding out that he's actually stronger than the pro hero Endeavor. Now the only person that he has to face off against is somebody like All Might, and after that he pretty much completed his dream of becoming the strongest. But after this, we basically just have all the internships end, and when they return to school, they end up just having the little race event to see how much they've progressed. Now Izuku would just use his general speed to find All Might and his know-how and knowledge to essentially go get All Might and be the winner of that event, leading to the final exams happening and the study sessions being just like they would in the original, with Izuku obviously having to face off against All Might finally, which is actually going to be pretty cool because, you know, he just fought Endeavor and now he's about to fight All Might. And the way that I see this all pretty much playing out is the battle beginning with All Might, like all the way towards like the exit, and Izuku just rushing straight at him, guns blazing, right? Bakugo's on his team, and Bakugo comes flying in with an explosion, only to be grabbed by All Might and slammed on the ground. But as that happens, Izuku shoots ice lances at the direction of All Might, which he would have to dodge out of the way and let Bakugo go. Bakugo would charge up a mean explosion and send it flying at the direction of Bakugo, or I mean All Might, as All Might pretty much is sent flying back, and Izuku would be there ready to unleash a strong attack, creating an ice saber and pretty much going to slash at All Might. But All Might would use his punches to redirect his trajectory up into the air and throw a bunch of air punches at the direction of Izuku. Now Izuku would have to jump out of the way, and immediately after this he would create an ice dragon that would shoot at the direction of All Might, leading All Might to actually get grasped by the dragon. Like the dragon would clench its jaw onto All Might, and All Might would have a tough time trying to break free, as he would crash into a building, and Izuku would look at Bakugo and say, "Bakugo, do it," as Bakugo flies at All Might using a howitzer impact right at the building, which All Might would get hit with and would be sent flying even further back. And after this, Izuku would say, just to put the final nail in the coffin, "I Sage," as he freezes the entire thing, and Bakugo stops sweating because of how cold it is, right? And in the smoke, All Might comes bursting out and just socks Bakugo in the stomach, right? And Bakugo's just like, right? And he like falls onto the ground and he's just completely knocked out. And Izuku's the only one left there, as All Might comes blitzing in at Deku, and Deku would rush in being like, "Fine then, hand to hand it is," as he comes in. And All Might throws a punch at him, but Izuku like rolls off the punch, grabs his arm, and like slams him onto the ground, leaving All Might to collapse with the ground and like cause a thud, as he ricochets back up and he tries to kick at Deku, but Deku jumps over it, and he grabs a hold of All Might, saying, "Ice capsule," as All Might pretty much just gets turned into a literal just statue of himself. As Izuku looks at him and he's like, "He'll probably break out if I don't," and it begins to crack like it cracks a tiny bit, and then Izuku's like, "I need more," as like he freezes it, and the ice just becomes thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker until it becomes ice so thick that it's the size of a literal like a building, right? And eventually the thing would begin cracking a little bit, but All Might, like, he would just get frozen and that would just be it. It would be just GG, right? And after this, Izuku would actually go on to his classmates and say, I defeated All Might. It's great. He's nonchalant about it or whatever. And Midnight would have actually been watching this. And Izuku just like winks at her, and she has a straight face, but on the inside she's like, "Can't believe that I'm going to be with somebody even more powerful than All Might," right? And Izuku at this current moment is 16 years old, bro. So the dude only has to wait 2 more years. That's really what we're getting to in terms of the story. Like this all has not been about becoming a hero. His secret intentions was always getting with Midnight. This is the real plot of the story. I'm just playing. No, but seriously though, guys, what ends up happening after this is we basically cut into the provisional licensing exam. Well, not necessarily after this, but after the forest training arc. And the reason that I say provisional hero training license before that is just because of the simple fact that if you guys remember back to part 1 or 2, I'm not really quite sure, Izuku ended up pretty much taking care of Shigaraki as well as Kurogiri, leading the League of Villains to essentially end up being disbanded, and all of the men that was in the League of Villains being placed under new organization, under a new leader that all for one deems to be more worthy than Shigaraki, far more calculated, smart, and dangerous than anything Shigaraki could have ever been. This is obviously going to be Overhaul, and because he has no real care about Bakugo or anything like that, I don't see anything similar to what the Vanguard Action Squad did happening. So the Forest Training Arc Camp is literally just a bit of a filler like episode. And what pretty much ends up happening is that they get to just enjoy their time, train with their quirks, and pretty much be with their classmates and have a great time. getting to work on their powers and their flaws and stuff like that. And eventually we cut into the provisional hero licensing exam, which essentially goes basically just like it would in canon, except when it comes to everybody who attacks UA, we would just get this cold scene of Deku pretty much freezing everything, and like all the balls that are coming at their direction just being frozen mid-air, like falling onto the ground and just breaking, right? And Izuku just like looking at all of the ice statues and like just being like, looks like these guys are already out, tapping them. And as you know, the entirety of UA, who really doesn't care about getting their own points, would just go over, tap it, and go on to the next event, right? As you know, that would be that. And Izuku would eventually pretty much get his hero license exam. And what happens immediately following this is the introduction of a character who was very, very popular in the fandom, obviously, Mirio. And this time around, mind you guys, Mirio does have one for all, because, you know, Deku doesn't get it, Bakugo doesn't get it, so it's only right for Mirio to get it, right? And so Mirio is going to be having one for all, and it's going to be pretty cool, but like nothing too crazy, right? But essentially what ends up happening is that Mirio goes to the classroom, right? And he is just as enthusiastic as ever, but when he sees Izuku, something inside of him just wants to fight him, because it's like the dude was able to defeat his master, and he wants to know if he could have that same luck if he was to fight against like All Might. They've never like sparred full power before, but he thinks that he's already surpassed them. So he thinks that he has a definite strong chance of defeating this guy, and maybe just showing him that there still is more that he could work towards, showing him that, you know, there's always room for improvement, something that Mirio already learned early on and that he lives by. So even when he advances in one for all's percentages, he continues to try to go higher and higher. Even if he was to hit 100%, I feel like Mirio would be the kind of person to try to go even further beyond. So we get into the battle between Class 1A versus Mirio, and this time around Mirio actually asks his classmates to actually get involved, such as Nejire and Sun Eater, and they would do so, making the attack on the classroom a lot easier, and Mirio would pretty much just focus on Izuku. And a couple of the weaker classmates, he takes them out screaming power, right, as he's using one for all to do this, and he does damage them a bit more than usual, but they'll be fine. And Nejire ends up taking care of some of the girls, with Tamaki taking care of like Kirishima and stuff like that, right? And you know, Nejire and Tamaki actually taking care of Bakugo himself. It would be a very hot fought battle, but it would still end up with Bakugo being on the losing side, and eventually Izuku being the only one left. Nejire comes in trying to use her abilities as Mirio says, Nejire, that's mine. And she backs up, and Mirio, like, he kind of cracks his knuckles and says, I heard you beat All Might. Let's see if you can beat a third-year student, right? Izuku smirks, and Mirio comes in blitzing at him with blinding speeds, as you know, a punch comes flying in, and Izuku would get punched straight in the face, not being fast enough to dodge it, as his entire like head would pretty much break off. And immediately after this, Mirio would be like, what? I didn't mean. And you know, Izuku reforms his head, and you know, he simply grabs onto Mirio as he says, you're done for, kid. Ice Age. But before he could do that, Mirio phases through the ground, making it so that he couldn't get frozen, and pops right back up on top of the ice, making him slowly start slipping. But with his quirk of danger sense and float, he would be able to keep himself mid-air long enough for him not to actually be having to touch the ice. And Izuku lunges at him, trying to defeat him very, very quickly, but Mirio, using one for all's high percentages of 60%, would be able to pretty much go by Izuku with blinding speeds, showing him that there is still more that he can pretty much improve on, and leading Izuku to be like, all right, so I'm pretty strong, but this dude is just fast and like powerful, like he's faster and stronger than me. What do I do, right? And so he begins to pretty much think of some strategies, such as creating the you know, his animal sculptures to go at him, and using clones to essentially catch Mirio off guard. But in the end, Mirio would pretty much get the upper hand, just due to the fact that he kind of has the perfect counter to Izuku. Not only does he have speed and strength, but he also has the ability to blatantly just dodge all of Izuku's attacks. He can just phase, and it's very hard for Izuku to deal with. And this is just showing him that he needs to get even more powerful. So this is not even a bad thing for Izuku. I mean, he is going to get way stronger because of this interaction, and his desire for training is going to skyrocket, leading him to pretty much get more and more powerful, and leading him to get to the same power levels that Aokiji would get to by the time that he's like 18, right? Or like 20-ish, right? But regardless of that, Mirio would offer Izuku a chance to intern with his agency, Sernadai. And Izuku is like, bro, like, say less, Brody. Like, I'll definitely totes accept, right? And he just like goes over to the, the agency. And pretty much what ends up happening this time around is that once they go on their hero patrol and they're basically walking around, this would be so anticlimactic. You guys are gonna get so mad at me. But basically what ends up happening is that Izuku and Mirio encounter Overhaul right in the alleyway, and Eri comes flying in, and she basically is like holding on to Izuku, and Izuku's like, is this girl okay? Right? He sees the bandages and just gets pissed. So like he holds her, and then like with one foot he like taps the ground, freezing everything, leading to Overhaul being frozen himself. But with his Overhaul quirk, he destroys the ice, and Izuku just looks as this dude really just did that. And so Izuku's like, fine then, I guess I'll take care of this in a better way, as he ends up pretty much shooting ice lances at the direction of Overhaul, which he has to dodge, leading Overhaul to shoot spikes at him. But before the spikes could even be shot, Mirio would come in with a with a death-like uppercut that would send Overhaul flying back, and Overhaul would crash into the ground as Mirio would fall right back down and just bam, 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 just begin pummeling this dude like hard as hell. And Overhaul pretty much gets like completely knocked out. Like the dude is dunzos. Izuku would take the extra precaution and freeze him, and afterwards we would just get Overhaul being thrown into the authorities, with All For One being like, every time this kid always captures my successors, right? And so Overhaul, All For One goes into hiding, knowing that like he kind of can't beat this kid. So for a couple of years he goes into hiding, and eventually once Izuku does end up becoming the #2 hero of the world, we basically end up having him fight against All For One in an all-out battle, which All For One actually ends up getting no diffed on an off-screen battle, which would just be like the best part. Like, could you guys imagine the big bad of a series just gets off-screen? Like, how mad would you guys be? Well, we're gonna find out with this one. But yeah, All For One pretty much gets no diffed, and because of the fact that he increases speed and just trains so incredibly hard, Izuku was eventually, because of just his personality, able to pretty much get over Mirio in terms of like his hero like saves and stuff like that. But he never became first, just because of the fact that Mirio just has that like #1 hero personality, and Izuku's just so nonchalant and chill that he would always remain at second place, except he would definitely be stronger than Mirio, because regardless of what power dude has, Izuku has Aokiji's devil fruit, and that would be more than enough for Izuku to be able to keep up with the best of the best. Not to mention that after a couple of years, due to the fact that he has powers from another dimension, I think it's definitely fair to give Izuku the abilities of Haki, like observation and armament and stuff like that, and even conquerors. And even though I didn't include those main things in the series, it was only due to the fact that I didn't think he would really need it, and I thought that I should mostly focus on the Hie no Mi aspect of the story. That said though, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys enjoyed today's story, definitely make sure to slap up that like button and comment down below. Let me know what you guys thought about today's story. But with that all out of the way, peace out.